It is an honor to have Vicki here with us today and to share her experience in Palestine and Israel with the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program. So I'm going to just turn it right over to Vicki, and at the end of her presentation there'll be some time for Q&A as well. So yeah, if you've got some good questions, hang on to them and we'll address them later.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to start off by showing off my vest. I had to mail this vest home before I left the country because if the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, found it in my suitcase, they would have confiscated it. So it's got the dove on the back and our name. And I like to show it because all these pockets would be in use all the time. And in this upper left pocket, I carry 2 rocks, 2 prayer stones that my congregation gave to me when I left. And they would tink together. And every time I heard them tink together, I thought of my congregation. And I also use it as a spiritual prayer practice. And I gave thanks to God that I was able to be safe and to do my work. But I'm going to take it off because it makes me warm. Okay. So who here, I'm learning how to do better at these presentations of finding out ahead of time. Who here has had the privilege to go to the Holy Land? Have you, when you were in the Holy Land, when you were in the state of Israel, did you cross the border and go into the West Bank, the occupied territories? So yes over here, no? No? Okay. So what I'm going to be talking about mostly today, the photos that you'll see today are from the West Bank, from the occupied territories. And so I am going to tell you of my experience there, which happened between January and April of this year. And I'm going to give some information as to what has been speculated as the security failure at the Gaza border. I wasn't in Gaza and not allowed to go to Gaza at that time, but I experienced what they're reporting in the news of why the Gaza border wasn't fully secure. And I'll give some reasons for that in a few minutes. So my talk today doesn't address Gaza particularly, but much of what I experienced has been experienced by people in Gaza by a multitude. And so this will just give you an idea of what life is like on the ground for Palestinians. So, as Nancy said, my name is Vicki McPhee. I'm one of the ministers at Simons Valley United Church. I'm a diaconal minister, and I entered into ministry through social justice. So it really isn't a surprise for many of my friends when I told them that this is something that I wanted to do. The first time I went to Israel, Palestine was in 2012 as a graduation present to myself from ministry training. And my spouse and I went, and we were participants on a United Church of Canada-led tour. And we went all the way through all the West Bank and the state of Israel, again, not to Gaza. When I was there, one of the tour guides of that trip, you know her, Dawn Waring, she was, so it was like April timeframe we were there. She was returning in November to be an ecumenical accompanier. And so I learned a little bit about the program, and I thought to myself, that looks really interesting. When I am, when my children are older, this is something I'm going to look into doing. And then as life goes on, I kind of let it get to the back of my mind. In 2019, I had the opportunity to lead a young adult trip to Israel, Palestine, with former moderator David Giuliano, and I took 10 young adults. And I was reminded of the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program. And so in 2022, when a call went out to the United Church looking for volunteers, I did a self-assessment. My youngest child was heading off to university that fall, and my ankles were still good, as were my knees, and I felt like I was pretty in a mental state. I felt pretty healthy. And I thought, okay, I can apply for this program. I have a video to show you in a few minutes, which you'll know why my knees needed to be good. But mentally, I needed to be good because it's 3 months away. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity to be away from everyone in your family and friends and your home for 3 months, but 90 days is a very long time. And so I applied, and the application process was actually longer than the time I spent in the West Bank. And so I went to, I was accepted, and I left for Israel on January 15th of this year. I want to say right off the top that Israel absolutely needs to be a state. There has to be a homeland for Jewish people. This is not in dispute. As a state, as a nation state that occupies territory under military occupation, they have responsibility to people living in the area. And this is what this presentation approaches, is what is the responsibility and what is the lack of care that is happening right now that had been happening in the West Bank. It still is taking place today. In all of my training, you won't hear much of it in my presentation, but I want to assure you that we met with multiple Jewish and Israeli groups. We heard from from the range of people who believe that Palestinian children are taught to kill Jewish people on sight, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where there are Israeli citizens looking to demilitarize their society and wants the occupation to end and there to be full citizenship for people who are not currently Israeli citizens. You'll hear me refer to the Israel state, the state of Israel. This is who's responsible for the military occupation. I do my best to never say Jewish people, I'll say Israelis. And then there are Palestinians. Now, Palestine's not a state, it is an area, but there are a whole range of people that live in that area that are not Israeli citizens. So they're Arabs, they are they are Muslim, and there are Christians. And then there's a lot of immigrants from or overseas workers that are there. So Palestinians are not citizens of Israel, and then there's Israelis, and that's how I'm going to be talking about the two groups of people. So the name of the program is the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel, EAPPI. I've been given the power of screen advancement. Let's see if this works. There we go. So I know this picture is a little distant for you, and bear with me if I'm going over information you already know, but I find it helpful to know that in 1948, the State of Israel was created by literally using a green marker on a map. And that's why the border of Israel is called the Green Line. So when you hear the reference, the Green Line, that's how it was created. And the Green Line, Can I do this? Oh, there we go. Okay, so here's the Green Line, right here. So all of this is Israel, the state of Israel, and this is the West Bank. This is Gaza. The West Bank is called the West Bank because it's on the west bank of the Jordan River. And there's the Dead Sea, and there's the Sea of Galilee up here. In 1948, Israel went in, people responsible for creating Israel went into many, many towns, villages, and took over villages that had been inhabited. The Bible would call them Canaanites, so Palestinians. And the Palestinians were told, pack what you can for a month, go away for a month while we sort out all of the state of Israel, and then you'll come back. And they have never been allowed to go back. And they have been refugees ever since. So they've taken the key to their home, and they have been refugees for many, many years, 75 years. So the key is a symbol for the right to return. Every refugee has the right to return. So any Ukrainian that has left their country in the last couple of years has a right to return once the war is over. And so there are many, many, many Palestinians waiting to return home. And so they carry the key as their symbol, as the right to return. This is Ada Camp in Bethlehem. It is the most famous refugee camp, although you might have heard Jenin in the news in earlier this year, but Ada is the most popular, like the most familiar camp, and you'll see they have the key at their entrance. In 1967, that is when Israel expanded its borders, and they tried to expand their borders, and they took over and occupied the West Bank and Gaza. And so that means there are two systems of law in that region. In the state of Israel, you are under civil law, just like we are under civil law here in Canada. In the West Bank, if you live in the West Bank as a Palestinian, you are under military law. And the military law differs quite a bit from civilian law. For example, you can't imprison a child younger than about 17 years old under civilian law. Under military law, you go to prison as young as 12. So you can see right away there's quite a bit of difference. If you're a child living in that area and you're 14 years old, it really makes a difference if you're under civil law or military law. What else was I going to say about that? I'll leave that for right now. So in 1967, that's when the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza began. And so it's been 57 years, if I've done my math right, 56 years that they've been under military occupation. Military occupation is nothing new. Japan was occupied, parts of Germany were occupied. Those occupations lasted in and about 10 years. We're almost at 60 years now with this area of the region. And as such, they're still supposedly under the Geneva laws, are applying the fourth convention of the fourth Geneva Convention. And so, I don't know what my next picture is, so let's take a look. Yeah, so there's lots of bullet points under the Fourth Geneva Convention. One of them is the occupying power shall not transport its population into the territory it occupies. So if you have the state of Israel and you have the West Bank, you can't move your population into. And guess what? There are Israeli citizens living in the West Bank. Not in Gaza anymore, they've been removed, but in the West Bank. And where those Israeli citizens are living are called settlements. I used to think a settlement was like a camp, like they had tents. No, these are full-on cities. They have schools, they have swimming pools, they have small medical centers. And so that is why, if you hear settlements are illegal, that's why they're illegal, because Israeli citizens are being moved in or they are moving into the occupied territories. It is also illegal to remove occupants from the occupied territories out of their homeland. So when the Russians started taking Ukrainian prisoners across the border in 2021, and taking them into prisons into Russia, it took the world 2 weeks to say, nope, we are now going to sanction you because that's illegal. You may not take citizens or people that have historically lived in that area, you may not take them across a national border. And where do people go when they're detained or imprisoned? When they're taken out of the West Bank often and into the state of Israel. So it's another contravention of the Fourth Geneva Convention. You also can't remove resources from an occupied territory. So if you hear of the BDS movement, and I will say right now, EAPPI is not a proponent of the BDS movement, but if you hear of the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions, it calls for the boycott of companies, Israeli companies that grow things or make things in the occupied territories and then ship them out. And so a cucumber grown in the West Bank is taking water resources out of that area, and Israeli companies are making money off of it. So that's why that's illegal, is you may not remove resources from an occupied territory. And you may not discriminate on the basis of race. And so in the occupied territory, if there is civil law for the Israeli citizens living in the West Bank, and there's military law for the Palestinians living in the West Bank, the difference there is race. One is Jewish, because Jewish is a culture, an identity, it's also a race, and the Arabs, or internationals. And so depending on what you look like and what your religion is, you're either under civil law or military law, and that's not allowed. You may not discriminate. The legal rules should be for all, not just for what group you belong to. Okay, so there are currently, this isn't true anymore because what's happened since October 7th has been a huge push of Palestinians out of the area. But before October 7th, there were about 5 million Palestinians living in the West Bank and 500 Israeli settlers. Settlers go to the West Bank because the state of Israel has a practice called aliyah, which is basically birthright. If you have, I won't get into it right now, it's a little complicated, but if you have a Jewish person in your history, it doesn't have to be your mother or your mother's mother. If you have a Jewish grandfather, you are permitted to do aliyah and move to the state of Israel and become an Israeli citizen. Houses can be expensive in Haifa or in Tel Aviv. It's cheaper to live in a settlement. So you might, as a settler, want to go live in a settlement because if you're an immigrant, you might want to go live in a settlement because it's cheaper, or you might have a theological reason, a religious reason for going, which is this is our land, from the river to the sea. You've been hearing that expression a lot in Palestinians, from the river to the sea, we shall be free. First time I ever heard it was from an Israeli politician saying from the river to the sea is ours. God has declared this our land, and so we're taking it. And so there's several reasons, because humans are complicated, but those are the two basic reasons why settlers would go live in the West Bank. In 2002, I don't know if I'm supposed to be going forward here. Okay, these are settlements. In 2002, well, first of all, you can see in 1970, there was just a scattershot of settlements. And now in 2016 is the latest picture we have. There are settlements all over the place. This is just the West Bank. So over here, you can see all the red. It depends on how big the cities are. And this is why they say it's difficult to consider a two-state solution, because I lived in Hebron, in order for me to get from Hebron to Ramallah, I could not just go on one road. I had to go through several checkpoints, because everywhere there's a settlement, there is security. So in 2002, Christian Palestinians living in the area said to the World Council of Churches, "Our lives are made difficult by checkpoints. Can you come see what it's like for us to have to cross a checkpoint?" So in 2002, Eappi began, and it started with people just literally going and standing at a checkpoint, an international standing at a checkpoint, and the guards could see that the internationals were watching. Maybe they were counting, maybe they were making notes, and just counted and made notes and sent it to the World Council of Churches of what they were seeing. So not anecdotes from people on the ground, like people that live there, but from people, more objective eyes, making comments. And so then it has evolved EAPPI is and I should state this right off the bat, we are not pro-Palestinian, we're not pro-Israeli, we are pro-human rights and international law, and we want to see an end to the military occupation. So people have asked me since October 7th, they've been surprised that I haven't put out comments and stuff that's anti-Israel. I'm not anti-Israel, I'm not anti-Palestinian, I'm not pro. I am pro-civilians not being killed. I am pro people having self-determination. So this is how I am viewing this, and this is how my outlook on this situation is. I try not to live in whataboutism. I try and say, I have as much empathy, and I was heartbroken on the morning of October 7th. And I have been heartbroken every day since then. There's been bombing in Gaza. And so that's where I stand right now. So EAPPI has evolved. We now do monitoring over these years. So upper left, there's this 14-year-old, he's being detained at a checkpoint. You can see the angle of the photo is really weird. We don't want our phones confiscated. So you kind of walk along and you take photos, right? You're trying to get the best photo you can, because the IDF, I'm gonna use that a lot, the Israeli Defense Forces, really don't want internationals paying attention. So we do monitoring of human rights abuses and contraventions of international humanitarian law, and it is illegal to detain somebody without arresting them or giving them cause. And so this, you can't see it in this photo, but his hands are zip tied, and he's had to wait there for an indeterminate amount of time until they declared whether or not he was a safety risk or a security risk. We deter human rights abuses through protective presence. That red bag right there is me. I am standing, there's several of us. This man here is a local citizen. Anybody with a brown vest there, and there's a couple over here. We're waiting for the soldiers and the settlers to do an incursion into this market. On that day, there were going to be about 30 or 35 soldiers come through and about 40 or 50 settlers. And this is the heart of Hebron. There should be no settlers in this area, but there are. There will be in a few minutes. And so we're hanging out with the storekeepers, shopkeepers, so that all their products outside their store won't get damaged or they won't be harassed. We offer solidarity with local peace and human rights activists. This is my buddy Lars, one of the people I served with. This guy here is Amr. And what you don't see very well here is there's a whole bunch of soldiers coming towards us there. I'm standing behind Lars, and I have this information on here. I have Amr's information on here. His handle on Instagram is Eye on Palestine. And him standing next to Lars there decreases the possibility that he'll have his camera taken by the soldiers when they walk by. Just simply standing and observing. Our role is not to intervene. Our role is not to physically get involved. Actually, somebody got arrested. One of the EAs got arrested because he broke one of those rules, and the police came and arrested him because he got involved. Our role is to observe and then write reports to the World Council of Churches so that they can combine all this information and continue to make pleas to the governments of the world to stop, to put an end to the military occupation. And then finally, the last task of EAs is to advocate for an end to the military occupation, which is what I'm doing right now. So that's my work. This is the bigger work, actually, than the 3 months there. I've been doing presentations since June. So I'm going to tell you some stories, and then you can ask me some questions afterwards. I will try and get through as much as I can, and I'm sorry if I'm just going to tell you as much as I can. When I was there, there were 6 teams. So there was a team in Jericho. You remember Jericho? That's the first city that they came upon when they crossed over into the promised land, and they walked around 7 times and the walls came tumbling down. So Jericho, there's a team there. It's a mostly rural posting. There's a big valley. That's where a lot of Palestinians have left or have moved away from in the last 6 weeks, because their livestock have all been killed by settlers, and so they have nothing, and their homes are being destroyed because what's happening in Gaza is distracting the world. So there's increased violence in the West Bank. There's also a team in Bethlehem. Everybody knows Bethlehem. It is just beside Jerusalem. Church of Nativity is there, Shepherd's Fields, all that. There is a team in Hebron. And then there's a team in Yatta, which is 8 kilometers south of Hebron, and it's also a rural area. And it's part of this massive area that right now is under military, it's a military zone. And so what they're trying to do is say that they're doing military procedures there, and so you have to leave. And then before I left, they said, what do you want to bet in a year there's going to be a settlement? Because we had to leave. But an Israeli citizen will go in with a trailer, and then they'll start a settlement, because that's how they get locals to move, is by creating a closed military zone. And then there's 2 teams in Jerusalem. Everybody else had drivers or cars, drivers with cars who would do their interpreting. Jerusalem, they walked within the small little area that they were taking care of. El Kahil, which is Hebron, was the only team that we had a big area, but no car, no interpreter. So we walked on average 14 kilometers a day. And somebody said, it must be nice to be going to the Middle East in winter. I have never been as cold in my life. And I've lived in Yellowknife, people, and Churchill. I have never been as cold as I was in Hebron, because it rained so much, and it was just freezing. They don't have indoor heating, they don't have central heating, and all the floors are marble. It was so cold. Anyway, the day I left, it was in the middle of Ramadan. We left early in the morning, 7 in the morning, to go to Jerusalem for our final our closing. And this is the only time that this road was ever empty, and I got the driver to stop so I could jump out and take a photo of the entrance to Hebron, because it was just always too busy whenever we were there. But during Ramadan, they stay up late. And then it's pretty quiet in the morning. Yeah. So we were 5 people in my team. So Helga up to the right, this is Helga, he's from Norway. Over on the left is Lars, he's from Switzerland. And there's Ian behind me, he is from England. And then we were so lucky to have Shireen. Shireen's grandmother was born in Palestine. She was a refugee and moved to Lebanon, and her mother was born in Lebanon. Her mother immigrated to Sweden. And so when she entered Israel, they couldn't track down her whole family lineage, and so they couldn't deny her entry. But if they could say that her mother was born in Palestine, they wouldn't have let her in. And she speaks Arabic fluently. So we were very, very fortunate to have her on our team. Okay. So, Hebron. If you've gone on a tour of the state of Israel that included Christian sites in the West Bank, you would go to Hebron for 1 day. You wouldn't sleep overnight there, you wouldn't linger. And the reason why you would go there is for this building. This is the Ibrahimi Mosque. This is supposedly, I always say, I'm a nice Christian minister, supposedly Abraham buried Sarah here at this spot. So this is a very holy site for the Jewish people and for the Muslim people. And as such, this site is highly contested. Hebron was one of the first places where a settlement grew, because the Jewish people were trying to get to build a synagogue here. You will notice at the top of this, let me do this again. At the top of this synagogue, there is a menorah, because now that building has been split into one-third mosque, 2/3 synagogue, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. So this building is something that we walked around, not literally around the building, but it's at the center of our catchment area of where we were working. Hebron is a very contentious place. Anybody that knows the area, when I said, oh, I've been posted to Hebron, everybody went, oh, because settlers and Palestinians live side by side, pretty much. And with settlers come the military. And the military are there. The military's role in the West Bank, in occupied territory, is to allow Israeli citizens to live as if they don't live in the middle of a conflict area. So when a settler is able to buy a house right next to your house, settlers buy it, and the first thing that happens is the military comes in and creates a safety zone, which means you are no longer allowed to drive on the road. You're no longer allowed to park your car in front of your house. You no longer can have visitors come to your house. Your family has to be put on a list to be approved to come visit you. You will not have people come and do maintenance on your homes because they're afraid of the military. And life gets pretty difficult. So that's why Hebron is a very contentious area. And a great deal of it is because of this high holy site. In I want to get the year right, I think it was 1994, an American Israeli citizen living in the biggest settlement right next to Hebron called Kiryat Arba, I'm going to pause, who recognizes the name Ben Gvir, if you're following Israeli news right now. Ben Gvir is from Kiryat Arba, okay? So it is one of the most right politics-wise of the settlements. Ben Gvir was not allowed to serve his time in the military because his political views were too right-wing. The military wouldn't let him in, and he lives right next to here. From that same settlement in 1994, an American Israeli citizen entered the mosque, which was, the whole building was mosque back then, on a Friday in Ramadan. For those of you familiar with Islam would know that that is a pretty important day, any of the Fridays in Ramadan. And he opened fire, and he killed 125 men as they were praying and injured untold number of people. First thing that happened after that was they locked down Hebron. They made all the Palestinians stay in their homes for a month. Israeli citizens could move about freely, but the Palestinians had to stay in their homes for a month. When the Palestinians exited their homes after a month, they found that their city was divided by checkpoints, and this delineation was created. So this blue and red kind of check mark, or dotted line. So everything in between here, all of this kind of gray area, became under military control. I mean, the whole area is under military control. This is an occupation within an occupation. And so here's the mosque right at the center. And so every time you see these black dots, these are some of the checkpoints. They're not all of them, and then there's these red ones as well, which are checkpoints. So we lived over here in H1. We lived if I was on the map, we would have lived way over here. It took 25 minutes to walk to where it says the old souk, which is where I was standing, where I showed you we were waiting for the military to come in. It took 25 minutes to walk there. So whenever I got a phone call saying, oh my word, stuff is going down, are you okay? And be like, yeah, I'm at home. I'm good. I was always safe at home. But you can see we would walk here to the old souk. We'd walk up here to see I'll show you what we were going up there to see, to the Rajaba house. Wadi el-Hussein is a valley, and there's Kiryat Arba, which is where Ben Gvir's family is from. We'd walk down around here. There's a couple of schools here, and we would go all over to Tel Rameda, which is a community over, I can't even see my own little thing, but over on the left. And we would do that walk. And we'd walk and we'd walk and we'd say hi. In that area, we couldn't wear our vests because we would have been arrested. It's becoming more and more difficult to be public that we are internationals seeking justice. We had to not lie, but we had to be very careful of how we enter the country, because if they knew we were coming to work with or participate with EAPPI, we wouldn't have been allowed in the country. 2 out of the 30 people that were on my group were deported. They weren't allowed in. So when, after this month, locals came out of their homes and discovered that their city had been broken up into what they could access or not access. First thing they noticed is they weren't allowed to walk down Shahada Street. Shahada Street this is what it looks like on any given day. All those metal doors were stores owned by Palestinians, and they were all welded shut with all of the belongings inside, like there's still belongings inside there, and this is 1994. This was the heart of Hebron. This was the market of Hebron. And now only internationals and Israeli citizens, settlers, can walk down this street. Palestinians cannot. The only time we walked down this street was when we were giving tours, because that was a part of our job too, is groups would come and we'd show them. So even though this would save us a lot of time in moving from one space to another, we never walked down this street, because we were there to be in solidarity with those that were being oppressed. So this next picture shows, this picture is a picture of that street, and you can see how it's bustling. Just that's what life used to be like before the mosque was attacked. That area is called a sterile street or a dead street. It's a very weird place to be in the middle of a big city, and it's just absolutely dead, with military standing with their machine guns observing you, and checkpoints along the way. I put a picture of this sign in because this sign was up when we arrived, and what it says in Hebrew is, if you see somebody with this symbol on their jacket, call the police. And so, this is why we didn't wear our jackets, our vests in there. Right above here, I'm going to tell you about it in a minute, right above here is the school that we would monitor. So people ask, do you think EAPPI makes a difference? What difference does it make? Before the world shut down, there were only 9 incidents of harassment. I mean, there were other things happening there as well, but harassment can be something, well now, not then, but now it would be like drones would follow us. That's harassment. You should be able to walk and not have a drone following you. So when we'd enter the area, a drone would go up and would follow us. Having our passports taken and photographed, being detained, harassment, and not just of us, of Palestinians, like that boy. In 2019, there were 9. EAPPI was gone for 2 years, and in 2022, when they returned, there were 63 incidents. So the settlers in the area have become emboldened. They haven't had internationals popping up in weird spots. And so the understanding is that things are getting worse, which we have seen now since October 7th. It's getting worse. This is another harassment. This is right near Checkpoint 56, which is the most dangerous area in Hebron. There's this house, and then the checkpoint, and then you're into H1, which is the Palestinian area. This woman had left her home to go to the market just to buy some vegetables. When she came back, her door was welded shut in 10 places. The IDF welded their door shut. There were 2 children in the house. They were welded inside. So we got a phone call. We went running, get to the checkpoint, argue about whether or not we're going to go through the checkpoint, decided we were going to go through the checkpoint, and we come in right away. We go up the hill a little ways, and we stand where it's safe, because we don't want to get involved, we don't want to get hurt. and we watch. And this fellow down here, this one here, he's the one who has contacted us and is calling us, and we're getting information, so we know what happened there. They were arguing, finally agreed that they were going to open the door, but if you're going to open the door, you got to do it yourself. So then they had to go find a saw. Well, the saw needed electricity. You know how many extension cords they needed? 3. They had to go from house to house to get 3 extension cords, and they finally got the door open, and the children were brought out to everybody's satisfaction. So that's an example of harassment, another example of harassment. So this is a settler, or this is a Palestinian that lives right next door to a settler, and they have put cages all around their house because the settlers, when they were walking up and down the road, were throwing rocks and wrecking their windows. And so if you Google caged house, Hebron, you'll see this family. We interviewed the father there in town, in H1. We weren't allowed to go to his house because we're not on the list. And we couldn't meet his wife because somebody always needs to stay in the house. Because if they leave the house empty, settlers will break in and occupy it, squatters' rights. So that car that's down below, that white car, that's not their car. That's their neighbor's car, settler's car. I told you, I'll tell you why we had to go all the way up there. So over here, if you can imagine, right across the street is Kiryat Arba. That's where that gunman came from. He lived over here. And there is another settlement, a smaller one, over here up on the hill. This ramshackly tent was put up and declared a synagogue. So now the settlers have built this lovely staircase that's right here. And what locals are worried about is then they're going to build a corridor. So the Kiryat Arba population can go to the settlement or to the synagogue and then up to the settlement to visit. And that means this road is cut off forever for local people, Palestinian people. As it is, only 60 Palestinian people are allowed to have permits to drive on this particular road. So one of our tasks twice a week was to walk up here and see what extra construction work was being done on that synagogue. I keep pointing in the wrong way. Okay, so remember the sign that I showed you, the yellow sign, call the police? This is right above. Our main tasks were to monitor access to schools. If you have more than a 10-minute delay in going to school, that is a violation of your human rights. We monitored access to worship. Again, if there's a delay in your ability to enter your house of worship, that is a violation of your human rights. And we monitored access to livelihood. So crossing through a checkpoint from West Bank into the state of Israel to work, because a lot of Palestinians do work in the state of Israel. They're good, cheap labor. This is the school that was our highest priority. If we did nothing else, if the weather sucked and everybody was staying home but the children were in school, we still had to go here. This is Cordoba School. I was really fortunate to get this picture. We'd be here at 7 in the morning, which is why I had a nice sunrise photo. And we developed really lovely relationships with the children. And so here I am. I'm looking down onto the checkpoint. And I'm back here a little bit because if I was down there wearing my vest, they would arrest me, but I'm up on the hill. And so I'm wearing my vest. And all the children that came to this school had to go through this checkpoint that's just down there. And you'll see it in a minute. And as likely or not, the gate would open or not open. And so again, as soon as the gate went open, we would start our timer. And then we'd phone the ICRC, the International Red Cross, and see if they could get the gate open, or we would take photos and document. You won't see very many photos of children in my work because of privacy. We want to be mindful of that. So this is a day that the checkpoint was locked. It was really no issue to come up to school because it's out of the security zone, but right down below at this checkpoint, there's an Israeli school. Why would they set up a school right there? I don't know, but so these children always were at the whim of this IDF officer making sure that it was safe for the children. Now, they couldn't go down out that gate and turn right because that's Shahada Street. No Palestinians are allowed down that street. They had to go out and turn left. And so this is just an example of what we would write up and send to the World Council of Churches. You can see all the children just waiting. Oh, and there's the Israeli school right across the street. So they must have had a lot of people dropping off kids or something that they didn't want to let Palestinian children go home. I am going to show you this video. It's just a few minutes long, but this gives you an understanding of why my knees had to be in good shape. Now, if you think, okay, it's a checkpoint. Yeah, so what? Like, how hard can it be? Well, as an international, it wasn't very hard. When I have a Canadian passport, really not given a hard time at all. But it slows people down, right? It slows you down. It detains you in a way that is slow walks you. You could get to Cordoba without going through the checkpoint, and you could leave Cordoba without going through the checkpoint, which we never did. We never went through the checkpoint because we didn't want to show our passport. So I'm going to show you how we left every day. And Keith, if you can just push play. I talk for a little bit and then I'll narrate it.
Ian and I are just wrapping up our time monitoring the checkpoint 55 at Cordoba School. And so our options now are to walk down the path that I'm about to walk and turn right and exit checkpoint 55, at which we would probably have to show our passports and we can't wear our vests. Or the other option is to go the slightly longer way. And so let's see what that looks like.
Okay. So you saw me standing here looking down. I'll do a very quick look over to the checkpoint. And then, so then we start going across country and you can see the steps and such. And then there was a kindergarten right here that we always stopped and waved at. And this isn't built sidewalks, right? I don't know, the video is a little laggy here, sorry. But it was all this uneven terrain. Ian loved the olive trees, so he would always stop right there and have a look at the olive trees. So I'm like, okay, I'll show everybody too. So I'll just pan over all these lovely olive trees and the rest of Hebron. And then, so then we'd walk along this path and then down some more rocks. It was a lovely part of the day. This will be at about 8 o'clock in the morning. The kids are all in school. And then we would get to the point where we were going to enter into that secure zone, so we needed to take off our vests. And we had to do this 3 times a day, so you'll always see us carrying a bag, because sometimes we could wear a vest and sometimes we couldn't. And then, so somebody was doing some work there, so we're waving at them. We get down to the bottom here, and Ian's going to turn around and say, there's a soldier coming. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's fine. I'll keep playing. And then when I actually get to the corner, I chicken out because I don't want my phone confiscated. And so I'm like, oh, it's fine, Ian, just keep going. And then I'm like, yeah, no, I better. So there's the soldier trudging up the hill. Now, if you could, we'll just stay on here for a second. I am going to take a hard right turn right now and talk to you about apartheid. Definition of apartheid. It's very controversial when we're talking about the West Bank. The definition, I have it written here. Maybe I don't. I thought I had it written. So if I find it in a minute, I'll say, just a minute, I want to tell you about it. But basically, apartheid is as I said earlier, it is not treating one group of people differently than another group of people based on race, orientation, any number of things. This hill is rather steep. When we first arrived, this hill was a dirt road, had lots of rocks and stuff like that. Down at the bottom of the hill, actually you can see the house that has the landing that has a metal fence. That's where we were taking photos of the welded door. So at the bottom of that hill, I had first arrived, it was my first day. We had come in and gone back up to the school because I had left something at the school and we were coming back. And the woman in the house was yelling at us. And Bryn, who was outgoing teammate, said, stay here. No, the woman was yelling, and Bryn said, what's the matter? And she tried talking to him, and at the same time, a massive rock came bouncing down this road and almost hit me, actually, because I was looking up at the woman. I'm like, holy shit. And so, get out of the way. Bryn looks at the rock, looks up at the woman, and she's pointing up the hill, and he's like, stay here. Well, I'm not staying there. I don't know what's going on. All the military are just around the corner. I'm brand new. It's my first day. So I kind of trucked up the road with him, a little bit behind him. There were 2 or 3 Palestinian boys, let's say that they were 12, that magical age, 12, that you can be arrested under military law if you're not a citizen. There were these 2 Palestinian boys, and they were looking up the hill, and there was a 12-year-old settler boy hucking rocks at them. And Bryn has his camera out, he's taking video, and I was just shocked because I wasn't ready for the violence. It just took me off guard. And some Palestinian mothers came out, as mothers would do, and said to the boys, go home now, go home, go home, go home. You could just tell. They were like, just leave, leave, leave. Whatever you do, don't pick up a rock. So the boys skedaddled out of there, the mothers skedaddled out of there. Meanwhile, the military is running up this road because rocks have been coming down. And I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. And so they go up to the 12-year-old Israeli citizen, settler, and they more or less kick him in the butt, tell him to go home. This is apartheid. Because if it had been reversed, and that boy had been Palestinian, and the 2 boys down the hill had been Israeli settlers, that boy would have been detained. He would have been taken away. He would have been arrested. Well, I don't even know, arrested is not the right word, detained. And they can hold them up to 6 months without charging them under military law. So that's why this is apartheid. It's 2 people, the same in almost every way, depending on one difference as whether they are charged under one law or sent home under another.
Good morning.
Oh, did that already. And I just include this photo because there's all this drama about the time that we were there, but then we'd have a moment like this where we were telling the students that we were leaving in the next few days, and one of the girls made us each a bouquet as we were at lunchtime saying goodbye to them. This is checkpoint 56. If you ever hear of anything going on in Hebron, if that makes it into the news and they're like, oh, there are clashes in Hebron, this is where the clashes are happening. You can't really see it with this photo. Oh, I'll go back. Can't really see it with this photo, but right here is a machine gun. It shoots rubber bullets, which are bigger than live ammunition. It's all black and burnt because tires get lit on fire and all these sorts of things. This is where, if there was something going on and we were supposed to be going to work, I'd be walking down the main road where there's lots of shops. Hebron is a lovely city. It's a very metropolitan city. But then you get to this point, and the vibe changes, and it's all market, like stalls and everything, and you kind of do like this. And if there were vegetable carts on the road and women and children, you could keep going. If the vegetable carts were all closed and there were men pulling up balaclavas over their faces, you're like, not today. And you would head home because it wasn't safe to be there. Because then the next thing was tires being lit on fire, rocks being thrown, and then live ammunition. In this spot, more than once, I saw, like you see on the news, the people with the bulletproof press vests. This is where they are when they're in Hebron. Sound bombs. This is where they set off sound bombs. If you've ever had the privilege of hearing a sound bomb, it's like a massive explosion. It's meant to startle you so much that you just want to leave. And Shireen was like, she was making fun of me one day, and she goes, you want to know how Vicki deals with sound bombs? And I started laughing because I knew what she was going to say. She prays every time. She goes, Jesus. Because I couldn't stop it. It scared me so bad every single time. It was just a terrible, terrible thing. So this was a very, very dangerous place to be, and yet we walked through there every day. We would come out from monitoring the school, and this is who would be running over to give us coffee. T-shirt guy. His name is Mohammed. Everybody's named Mohammed, so we gave them nicknames so we knew the difference. Mohammed, T-shirt guy, no matter how cold it was always wearing a T-shirt. He would see us coming out of checkpoint 56, and he would run and get us coffee and give us coffee. He was so friendly. So this is H1 now. Looking away, this is where Palestinians mostly have control over their living. He's a shopkeeper. He was so delightful. People ask me what the scariest time I had in Hebron. It was on this day. I was standing at the school. We were just about done, and the gate banged open at 55, and 6 fully armed soldiers came running up the steps. I thought, oh no, they're coming to take our jackets, like they're coming for us. I just about passed out, like I've actually got, like, you know that expression, weak in the knees? I got a little weak in the knees, and I had to do like a head to toe, what's on my person that they're gonna take from me? I hadn't made notes yet that day, so they could take my notebook, that was okay. Oh shit, they're gonna take my phone. Well, my phone has lots of stuff in it. And so I was doing like an assessment, and then they went past us. And I had managed to get over and stand by Ian at this point because I figured the two of us together was stronger than apart. And they ran past us, they went and stood at the school for a little bit, and then they walked by, and one of them even had the nerve to wave at me. We found out later that they were looking for a teenager, and I actually saw the teenager taken into the holding zone, so later in the day. But that was, I had to sit down for a little bit after that. I think I had to go get some chocolate after that. Okay, so that's monitoring schools, monitoring the mosque. So the mosque is the biggest mosque in the West Bank outside of the Golden Dome Mosque, the Alaska Mosque area up in Jerusalem. It's here. So during certain holidays, people would come from all over. Buses would come from Turkey, filled with Arab people, Muslims, but this is just on a regular day. You can see there's a delay here because they have to go through this, what you and I would consider a cage. This is a turnstile, and that turnstile would randomly work and not work. It was so annoying. And then, so they'd have to go through there. Often the men would have to lift their shirts and show their waistbands and their tummies. That's harassment. And then they had to wait again, right here. A story, I was coming from down below. I was walking past here, and I heard a soldier yelling in English, "You will not go, you're not allowed to go, you're kicked out, you're not going," and she's just screaming. And this Palestinian-looking man, 2 men, came out with 4 or 5 little children, and they went back into the old market, which is Palestinian-controlled, supposedly. And so I caught up to him, because she was yelling in English, so I figured they spoke English. So I caught up to him, and I wasn't wearing my vest, and I said, "Can you just tell me what happened? I'm with the World Council of Churches." Yeah, he's Canadian. He's visiting his family member. They were taking their children to the mosque. And they were going through that shuttle, and they were being told that the children could only go one at a time. And he said, "Why? Like, these children are not a problem." And he was mouthy, and she made her mad, and she didn't let them go in. Because how dare you question, right? So this is on a high holiday, a Jewish high holiday, and so this is an Israeli settler walking from Kiryat Arba over to, classes. You can tell it's a big Jewish holiday because they have the flag out. And so they've separated so that anybody coming to the mosque that's Palestinian has to walk over here, and the Jewish people walk over here, Israelis. I don't know if I've included the photo. Do I have to stand a certain way? Can you advance it for me, Keith? So, not only access to mosques, access to churches. While I was in Jerusalem, the quarter of Jerusalem is the It's just gone out of my head. But it is the Christian denomination. They have that quarter. Why can't I think of what it is now? It's the Muslims, the Jewish, and the... Anyway, it's Christian. They were under attack. They were being vandalized by settlers. This is me. I'm crying in this photo because I had been worried for an hour. This is Easter Sunday. I had days off, and I didn't put it through my head that it was also Passover. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be allowed through the checkpoints. No Palestinian can cross a checkpoint on Jewish holidays. And I was really hoping that because I had an international passport, I was allowed to go to Jerusalem for my days off. And I had just gotten on the bus, which was going to go through the checkpoint. The nuns were on the bus and was like, Christ is risen indeed. And I started crying because for an hour that it took me, Hebron is only 30 kilometers from Jerusalem, and it took me an hour to get to Bethlehem. I still had another half an hour bus ride to get to the old city. So anyway, it's not just access to mosques is what I'm saying. It's access to churches as well. And access to livelihood. This is a massive checkpoint that we monitored once a month. We got up early in the morning. We were there at 4 a.m. when the checkpoint opened. And on this day, I always seem to be paired with Ian in my photos. On this day, this is a massive checkpoint. And out of all the stalls, like the turnstiles inside, only one was working. And so there are thousands of people waiting, men waiting, and there are thousands more inside. And dollars to donuts, many people will have lost their jobs because they didn't show up to work on time, because they're just going through the checkpoint, and then they have to get on a bus, like I did, had to get on a bus to go to Jerusalem, or to wherever. So how checkpoints are used... Checkpoints are used to harass, detain, and to slow people down. They can say it's about security. There's often other ways around. It's about slowing down, harassing, and detaining. And how they do that at checkpoints with working men is it's a permit system. You can only enter into the state of Israel if you have a work permit. No matter what kind of work permit you have, guess how long it lasts? How many years, months, or days? 90 days, 3 months. So they live 3 months to 3 months to 3 months to see if their permit will be renewed. If there's something going on in the village, they will take a child, a teenager, they will detain them, and they will say, tell us everything you know, and if you don't, we'll revoke your dad's work visa. If you tell us everything, we'll get your dad a work visa or a permit. So the permit system is a very delicate play. So they also didn't know, after however long it would take to get through the checkpoint, if their permit would work. Oh, it's broken, because they were plastic cards. Or, I don't know, you've done something, go and figure it out. So it's a tricky thing. Again, this is just another photo of, we did have lighthearted times. And so this is just me walking from Kiryat Arba area over to the mosque. And I learned enough Arabic. I took Arabic twice a week while I was there. And I learned enough, not that I kept it, but I learned enough that I could ask children how old they were. I could say how old I was. And I could tell them that I was a priest in a church, because that's the language that they were familiar with. So here are some shopkeepers. The one on the right is in that really secure zone. And she's very happy because she just got all of her supplies for Ramadan. Ramadan was about to start, and she was going to be able to provide for the people that lived in the area. And the woman on the left is Layla. She's the only female shopkeeper in that old market area, which is a tourist draw. If you go to Hebron, you go to the mosque, and you go to the tourist area, to the market, to the old souk. So this is inside the old souk. You'll see Shireen, she's back there having a rest. This is Gandhi. He was a juice presser, and he lives in that, where Shireen is a door up above, and he lived above this area. He has a little 2-year-old and a baby on the way. I'm sure she's been born already. And we had to go and write a report because settlers live all around here, and settlers had come and thrown garbage and rocks to damage his Ramadan. Well, it wasn't Ramadan yet. I'm just showing you a picture before Ramadan, but our report was they had tried to destroy all of his lights that he had put up for Ramadan, because the stairway in their homes are just open to the elements, and it's all stone, and you go up the stairs and then you go through a door, and so they don't worry about closing in that stairwell. I know it's not Ramadan here because he's pressing juice, and that wouldn't be something that would be done during the day, because you don't eat or drink or smoke from sunup to sundown. Let me tell you, being a non-Muslim in a Muslim country during Ramadan, oh boy, I was thirsty and hungry a lot. Yeah. I have a whole different appreciation for fasting. So this is the market, and I show these pictures because settlers live all around, so they've had to put up this netting, these protective screens over the market. There's a bottle here filled with yellow fluid, and it's not iced tea. This is what garbage gets thrown down onto the people in the market from settlers living above. This is why Hebron is a microcosm of what's happening in the whole area, because they're living so closely together. Where I was standing with the red bag, and I said, oh, we're waiting for the settlers to come out. This is a bit of a discussion that's being had with the commander of the IDF one day, and this photo was taken, I don't know if I took this photo or if it was my colleague, but we're inside the shop. So we're very visible here wearing our vests, and that's the commander, and the fellow on the left, his name's Batter. And so they were having a discussion about why things were getting broken in front of his shop. I'm almost done. So where his shop is just over here on the left. This is their military installment, and this is the gate where they were all coming through, and you can see all the soldiers. As a Canadian woman who lives in, Calgary, I'm not used to machine guns. So it took a little while to get used to this on a regular basis, but funnily enough, you do. You don't get used to sound bombs, but you do get used to this. I put this picture in here because this guy's Canadian settler. And he'd do everything he can to get your attention. And we didn't want to be talking to the soldiers or the settlers. So anyway, I just Canada is just a part of the settlement movement as Americans are. There we go. So this is settlers walking through. They're going on a tour. Supposedly there's some holy site, Jewish holy site, that they should have access to. So they walk through. You see she's dressed up for this settler tour. I don't think this photo has the baby carriage in it, but babies come through. This is the, Shireen would call him a Yahoo. This is the Yahoo over here on the left who's taking pictures of our passports. They've come and taken Shireen's and my passport. We were worried, we didn't know what they did with that information, if we were going to get questioned when we left the country. It was fine, but it's unsettling when somebody takes your passport away and he's got a machine gun. Keith, can you put it forward for me, please? Okay, so I on Palestine would not take our photos showing our faces, so this is somebody else has taken this photo because we didn't want to be outed on social media. My congregation didn't know what I was doing. They just knew I was on a leave of absence, not a sabbatical. I was on a leave. I was going to come back in 3 months, and I was probably going to visit some holy sites. That's all they knew. They didn't know any of this until I got home. So Shireen is here, and the settlers are walking through, and the guards are trying to keep the peace. Well, they're trying to keep the settlers safe. They don't care about what I can't work this anymore. I'm sorry, Keith. And the next one is, okay, so bottom right, those are tear gas canisters, used tear gas canisters. Far left, the woman, female soldier, she's got all the fresh tear gas here, and this fellow right in the middle has got the launcher. Just your friendly walk through the old souk. This is just us following the soldiers through the market. Yeah. Next photo, please. Okay, I'm near the end. This is Zidane. You want to know Hope? Hope is Zidane. He lives right next, this is checkpoint 56. He lives right next to here. His teeth are not his own, and he's lost his left eye because he's been beaten by the soldiers. He was carrying a sledgehammer that he needed for his work, and a soldier came to him, grabbed the sledgehammer, and whacked him across the head with it. He is one of the key leaders of the human rights defenders, and what they do is they teach teenagers how to film events, incidences that are happening, and then to get the, whether they're on a phone or with a camera with a memory stick. And then they upload it to social media so people around the world can see what they're enduring, what they're dealing with. And so he is resilient. He is fiercely passionate about being able to stay where his parents were born, where his parents' parents were born, where he was born. And he does it through peaceful action. He doesn't, there is not violence. Any group that we work with or would not be violent. It's all through, like we work with community peacemaker teams. It used to be Christian peacemaker teams. It's community now because you don't have to be Christian. Before we move on from this photo, how I want to relate this to Gaza just briefly is if soldiers are needed to protect you from Palestinians, to protect Israeli settlers from Palestinians, and to allow them to live a life that doesn't have to involve conflict, that's all well and good. You set up a base, you set up a checkpoint. But as settlers are becoming more and more emboldened, they're doing more and more violent things. Like walking down that road with the synagogue on it, there are Palestinians living all up and down that road. And when you walk down that road with your rifle or with a handful of rocks and you take out the windows of the houses as you go, how many windows would be broken before the owners of the houses would come out and try and stop them? So how many military soldiers do you need walking with you? Because it's not their job to police the settlers. The police do that. The military's job is to protect them and to allow them to live without getting hurt, even if it means stopping Palestinians from defending themselves. And it's been happening more and more, and we saw that on Purim, which was the beginning of March. It's 2 days of celebration. The rules of Purim, in the Jewish festival of Purim, you read the book of Esther. It's a terrible book. It's how Purim was established. The rules of Purim are to get so drunk that you cannot tell the difference between cursed be Haman, who is the bad guy in the book of Esther, or blessed be Mordecai, which is the good guy in the book of Esther. You have to get so drunk, you can't tell the difference between cursed be Haman, blessed be Mordecai. What happens when you get a bunch of yahoos that are drunk out of their mind? Damage. We spent days writing reports after Purim. They came in, they damaged, they took, I don't know what they had for weapons, but they smashed all the car windows. They put darts in the car tires of the Palestinians. They stole water tanks and rolled them down the road. We saw video of this. They do that with the military hovering because what's going to possibly happen is a Palestinian person come out of their house and try and get their water tank back. They're under lockdown because it's Purim, but still, you would be tempted, right? You would be tempted to protect your property. So that's what they're saying in Gaza. I'm not saying I know this because I'm an expert. I'm saying I've listened to a lot of the news. I have been on Zoom calls with people who are still in the area. I'm getting direct text messages because I know people in different areas. And what they're saying is because the military was focusing more and more on protecting settlers, They had to be drawn from somewhere. They say it's 100% mandatory for you to join the military, but they only get about a 50% participation rate. And let me tell you, if some of those young people that were manning the booths in Hebron had to go to Gaza and take part in a real war, those are not the military that's going to protect Gaza, right? Like these 18-year-olds that are bored, filling their time. So the theory is they didn't have the proper security net set up at the Gaza border, and so that's why it was taken out so easily. There is no justification. I'm just saying that's the theory, how we understand of why security wasn't at its optimal level at Gaza, is because they were in the West Bank protecting settlers. Next photo, please. Oh, we got an award. We got a plaque from Human Rights Defenders. The program coordinator started crying almost, like he got tears in his eyes, and our security officer got tears in his eyes, because we said, we have this plaque. What do you want us to do? And they're like, why did you get a plaque? And it said, for our great partnership. They said, no EA group has ever gotten a plaque from Human Rights Defenders. So I just throw this in here. They voted me to be the one to receive it. So I'm just lifting ourselves up a little bit. Our group worked very hard to establish relationships with all of our working groups there in Hebron. Next photo. This is from Yatta. And this is the reason why I didn't want to be placed in a rural setting. We were allowed to do placement visits. I went to Yatta. I spent like a day and a half, and then I left. So this is all cute. They stink really badly. This is all really cute, but why I didn't want to be in a rural area is how settlers interact with shepherds, is they break the legs of the animals or they kill them. And I just didn't want to have to do reports on that. So I went for a day and a half, and I enjoyed myself while I was there. Got to see some pretty lovely views. This isn't my photo, but I was like, after hearing what's happened since October 6th or October 7th, I'm glad I wasn't there. Next photo, please. I went to Bethlehem. Do you remember, the name is confusing because it's the same as my partner, but Shireen, she was an American Palestinian. She was killed by the IDF in April of 2022. So her picture is up on the wall. This is the separation barrier in Bethlehem. Next photo, please. George Floyd is there as well. Next photo, please. So I was there for an educational day, and I also went for a swap. And so this is in Ida Camp. This is right against the wall. This is a young female teenager soccer or football practice. But it was during Ramadan, so they weren't allowed to run. They were just practicing footwork because they hadn't eaten since before sunrise. Next photo, please. This school is outside of Bethlehem. We arrived in their car, like Bethlehem has a driver, and I was told by the person I was with, take off your vest, you're not allowed to wear your vest. And so I got out, and the kids are lining up to go into school, and I said, why aren't we allowed to wear our vests? Because we were out in the middle of nowhere, it seemed like. And they said 10 years ago, settlers came over that hill, saw the EA team, phoned the military. Military came, picked up the two EA members, and drove them straight to the airport, and they were deported. So they don't wear their vests there. So there's a settlement just over that hill. Next picture, please. And this, as you can imagine, the settlers were doing some harassment of the school, so the Palestinians have done this to the road outside of the school. So settlers, also the Palestinians, nobody can drive on this road anymore and get close to that school. This is how the Palestinians are protecting their children. There's another longer way to get to where they need to go, but for now, this is how they're managing, because the state of Israel won't stop the settlers from harassing that school, so they've made it difficult for cars to get by. Next photo, please. Okay, military court watch. I'm gonna just tell you, just very, very quickly, this is how I know so much information about children. under military law, because military court watch follows children as they've been detained all the way through being either convicted or released. This was an educational day. I went and watched court procedures. I was in the courtroom, and it's just important to know, oh, here, this is where I saw the definition of apartheid. The implementation and maintenance of a system of legalized racial segregation in which one racial group is deprived of political and civil rights, and that's from the Cornell Law School. And Canada has rejected that what is taking place in the occupied territories is apartheid. I went to the embassy and I talked to, not the ambassador, but somebody there, and I said, what is the deal? What is Canada doing? And he said, nothing. We have lost we have no expertise in the area anymore. And I said, well, can you at least call it apartheid? No, it's anti-Semitic. I said, can you explain to me how it's anti-Semitic? No. Well, can you share with me the definition that you're using of apartheid? Well, no, you can go look when you get home, you can ask the Canadian government. So, it was just a runaround my day at the embassy. But 97% of children detained live within 1 kilometer of a settlement. In an effort to keep the peace around a settlement, if anything goes down, children are arrested, taken away, and they're asked to tell. They're asked to collaborate with the IDF. And so, So I've got this information. I don't know if I do. Military Court Watch. I can write it down for you. It's something that you can look up on their website. They are doing some really good work. They are Jewish citizens and international citizens. They're a group of something like 8 lawyers working there. And the one person who toured us knows Hebrew, Arabic, and English. So she can hear the whole court procedures. Of course, it takes place in Hebrew. How many Arabic children, how many Palestinian children understand Hebrew? Right? So it's a system that's set up for failure right from the beginning. Next photo, please. And this is the end. So this is that checkpoint to go to the mosque, where it's somewhat empty on this day. And so the regime of separation and violence has made life intolerable and commercial activity impossible for Palestinian residents. Day after day, year after year, this policy chips away at Palestinian communities in the area. I will say, up until Gaza, the Israeli state has moved dramatically, state government has moved dramatically to the right. The Sunday or the weekend that I arrived in Jerusalem for my training was the beginning of the protests against, the Israeli protests against their government about what Benjamin Netanyahu wanted to do to the judicial system. They are still protesting. I was there, my first weekend was January 22nd or something. This is Bet Salem. It's an Israeli peace group. The occupation is, the end of the occupation obviously will benefit the Palestinians. It will also benefit the Israelis. There are Israeli citizens who know what's going on and want an end to what's happening, to the occupation. And what the state of Israel says is they don't want genocide. They're not creating camps with gas chambers. They just want people to leave. And I will say, in Gaza, and I would have said this before, they don't have permission to leave. In your Canadian passport, open it up. On the inside of your Canadian passport, it says, this person is traveling under the authority and the protection of the Queen. Now it's going to say the King. In a passport by a Palestinian, that leaf says, this person is not an Israeli citizen. They don't have freedom of movement. They have to get permits to cross checkpoints. They have to get permits. They can't fly out of Tel Aviv. They have to cross into Amman, into Jordan. They on any given day, they don't know if they're going to be able to get to point A to point B, never mind point C. They do not have self-determination. They do not have a nationality. And they don't have the protection of a government. And this is what I this is what concerns me, and this is what drove me to go and to give observation and protective presence, so that I could come and tell the stories, and that I could do something as a white English-speaking Christian who really can't do much else, but I can go watch and I can go take photos. And then I think the next screen, the last screen, is just all the things that I have written here. I have all of that written here. Just all the different organizations. No Way to Treat a Child, that's the United Church of Canada sponsored endeavor, meaning ending child detention. Eappi is a Palestinian Christian organization. They'll take you on a tour. If you want to go to Israel, Palestine, when all of this stuff is over and it's safe to go, book a trip through them. Don't book a trip through an Israeli group unless it's an Israeli peace group that will take you into the West Bank. Eappi will take you into the West Bank, and they'll take you to all the holy sites in Galilee and such. And so that's the end. That's my last. I know I talked a lot, and I've held you here for a long time. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'll get Keith. Is this on? Oh.
Thank you for a fantastic presentation. I got here a little late, but I've been in Israel twice, and I know what's going on over there. In your opinion, in your view, is Netanyahu doing the right thing by his citizens? Because we hear so much controversy how he's maybe very good and very, very bad. So what's your view of Netanyahu for his people?
Well, how I understand it is he's reviled, and as soon as this is over, he's going to lose. He's going to be punted out of government. His whole political stance has been only he can protect Israeli citizens, and this massive security breach happened under his watch. And how I understand it is the only way he's still in power is he's made a new coalition government that can only make decisions based on war. And as soon as the war is over and they go back to making civil decisions, he'll be gone. No, and he's moved further and further to the right because they have a coalition kind of government. They're different from us. It's kind of like how Justin Trudeau is partnered with NDP to not trigger no confidence votes, but it's not. It's way more complicated. They had something like 6 elections in 5 years because they couldn't get enough of a majority. So he's been moving further and further to the right to keep power. And also, he's a la Donald Trump. He's in the middle of a trial. And if convicted, they don't know what happens when a prime minister is convicted of corruption. So yeah, but as long as he's prime minister, certainly he can't go to jail, right?
I was just curious about EAPPI. How many faiths are involved in that? And the information that you're gathering, how is that shared with governments around the world?
So all the reports go to the UN and to the World Council of Churches. And they're using it to do advocacy just like I am, but they're doing it on a larger scale with governments. So I'm not a part of that next level. I'm the feeder to that. So they're like when you hear the UN standing up, like UNRWA and that standing up and saying, this is why we're advocating for change because all these things happened. They know all of this had eyewitness accounts. These aren't just, well, I heard Bobby down the street got shot. No, somebody has an eyewitness statement to that. All faiths are involved. Maybe not Jewish. Maybe not. But while I was there, the next team that came, somebody was allowed in the country. She was wearing a hijab. Shireen was Muslim. There's also non-faith traditions. And in fact, the European countries put us to shame. The United Church of Canada can only afford to send 2 people a year. I was fully funded. I didn't get paid at work, but I didn't have to pay to be there. Norway, Sweden, Finland send the most. There's a bit of a competition who can send most people. There were 8 Swedes while we were there in my group. And that's because they either get paid, they pay them to go, or they at least subsidize them in some way. There's high expectations. They have to write a report. They have to do all this stuff for their sending organization. But they're also very young. And that's you have to be a minimum of 25 to be in the program, and I think 70 is the eldest. And what I'm finding, or what I experienced, was the young folks, the youngins. It's so funny that I'm saying that. The young people, they're doing it for their resumes. They do it because they feel called to do it, but it doesn't matter what whether they have faith or no faith. What they're doing is they want to work with refugees, and this allows them to get some experience in that area. Like my friend Shireen, she works with refugees. Lars has started working with migrants. So they're using that time of their life where they don't have commitments. I wanted to wait, right? I mean, I went, I was 50 years old, and my children had moved out. And so I could take a leave of absence. I could afford it, kind of. And so we did that. But if you're 26 and you don't have children yet, and you don't have quite as many anchors yet, they're doing that more and more out of Sweden, Norway, and Finland, and Switzerland. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you. I had cousins who went from Scotland probably 10, 15 years ago with the Y, and the plan was for them to help the Palestinians plant olive trees.
Yeah.
And what a failed exercise that was, because as soon as they planted their olive trees, the Israeli soldiers came behind them and just pulled them out again.
Yep.
And quite frankly, didn't really believe a lot of the photographs they showed, which were even much more graphic than yours. I mean, the things that are thrown over the grids, over the markets, are absolutely horrendous. Vile, absolutely vile. And so I found this very interesting. Sort of, you were almost saying exactly what they said so many years ago.
Yeah, and it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how I understand it right now is they're in still a zone of lockdown, like what's happening because of Gaza, but that's called collective punishment. That's also against the Fourth Geneva Convention. You're not allowed to punish a group of people for something that this person over here did. Can't punish you because this person over here did something. So what's happening in Gaza is they're locking people down in the West Bank. Hi.
Thanks very much for your time spent there, your training and your presentation, and risking your life to be there. My name is Peggy Burris, and I have a postcard that I got from friends from Israeli-occupation.org, and I know this is, there's been a long-standing conflict between the groups in that land for centuries.
Yep.
But if you could just remind us briefly what it was during the war, after the war, that took the country of Palestine and divided it and gave land to Israel, and now that part has, Israel has taken over almost all of Palestine.
So that land wasn't a country. It didn't have a nation state. It was under the British mandate. And Ian had to keep apologizing to people. Anna min Inglaterra is how you say I'm from England. Anna min Inglaterra, and he's like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Because the British mandate controlled that area in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And when the world decided that Israel needed to be created, coming out of the Holocaust, there was lots of negotiations. It was either going to be Argentina or the Middle East, like the Palestine area. And so they went in and they carved out land. And they understood that Jerusalem is a high holy city for the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jewish people, so that was a no man's kind of territory. But that area you have a picture there, I see that. Yeah, the area on the left was near the sea was going to be Israel. And then the idea was that they were going to make a plan. It was called a demarcation line. It wasn't a national border yet. It was a demarcation line. And then they were going to negotiate how that other area was going to become either a state, a nation state, or be given, like with Jordan. And Jordan had some responsibility over that area. And then in 1967, I'm not an expert on this, but in 1967 there was a 6-day war. And Israel said, paraphrase, screw it, we're taking it. And they went all the way to the river. And so all that area that wasn't technically theirs, that's what's become occupied territory. And Gaza. And Gaza used to have settlers living in there. And then they decided, well, we'll give Gaza back and be Palestinian controlled. And they forcibly removed the settlers. And they were mad. They were mad. So if you read the book of Exodus, as we're doing right now in our Bible study, all of my Bible study was like, oh, we need to stop and just take a breath. Because we are at the point right now where God says to the Israelites wandering the desert, I have promised you land. It is your land. It will be your land. You're going to get there. And it's like, crap, here it is. From the river to the sea, Judea, Samaria. So you'll hear Israeli politicians not referring to it as the West Bank. They'll say, all of Judea and all of Samaria are for us to populate. That's using biblical language, not current day language.
Yes, we had a similar time of pause, didn't we, Jeff? In our Bible study when we looked at those readings from Exodus.
Yeah.
And just it hit you in the face.
Yep. You remember, when they went to Jericho, what did they find? Canaanites already living there. Like, this is a modern day version of what is taking place in that story. Do I feel like there'll ever be peace? You know what? Ironically, there might be some version of peace after this. And the reason is because the Arab countries around, okay, first of all, I want to say, in Iran, the children are taught, they have to say at the beginning of each day, they have to say 3 times, death to Israel, death to England or Great Britain, death to the United States. So Israel has a right, or has a real reason to be afraid of people surrounding them. But the Arab nations surrounding what's happening right now can't advocate, they're holding off invading or holding off coming to the Gazans' protection because there is right now hope that there might be an area carved out for the Palestinians. If Benjamin Netanyahu or the Israeli government goes as far to say nothing for no one that is not Israeli, then there might be a real war, because then there's no hope. What was happening in Gaza was already, let's be clear, it was already a humanitarian crisis before, and now it's just devastation. So if there's no hope, people say, well, you can't expect Israel to go back to October 6th. It can't go back to October 6th because there's been too much revealed. So there might be a possibility that Israel might say, oh my word, will you just go live over here and be the Palestinians? Or can we integrate somehow? I don't know how that works because there's a lot more Arabs living in non-Israelis living in the area, so I don't know how that voting bloc works. But ironically, I don't think it's right for us to say there's no hope. It's terrible right now. Thank God for the pause. Right? Like when you have to write on your children's arms or backs in Sharpie what their family name is so that they can be buried with their family in case they get separated in a bombing. Like, is this the right approach? So.
What's your view on the reluctance of the international community to condemn Israel and what they're doing in Gaza?
Well, anti-Semitism is a very difficult charge to deal with. And, of course, the stupid Holocaust. And the international community didn't help the Jews then. There's a lot of guilt. And it's pretty hard to be critical of the actions of the state, you have to walk a pretty fine line, because if it's considered anti-Semitic, then you can't move forward. Canada will not stand against the United States of America. So how the US votes at the UN, Canada will follow. Why? Because the United States is our best friend. Why? Because we share a border. Yeah, when we're smaller than the state of California, right? We are, yes, we are complicit.
We are complicit by being part of the Commonwealth and being part of then the British Empire as it was.
Right, and so as the lone Canadian in the group, when we were talking about colonization, because this is what we're talking about over there, we're talking about colonization that is at a different stage of what we are, of decolonizing. I was the one that they'd look at me and say, so in colonization, when you're decolonizing, right, Vicki? Yeah, I'd have to say, this is what reconciliation looks like. This is what apologies look like. But decolonization, like what's happening with the West Bank is colonization. And so we're complicit, but we also understand more. Like we can have opportunity here to be a force for good, but we don't have the political will right now. So, but I want you to remember Zidane. So I want to end on a hopeful note. It's not always hopeful, and it's not gilding the lily, but know that there are people there that are determined to seek justice, and those are the people that we're trying to support. Yeah.
That's a good note to end on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vicki.
You're welcome.
Let's thank Vicki for her time.
I have cards here if you want to email me or ask me more questions. I'm happy to do presentations. Obviously, I like to talk. And here's papers that have all the organizations' Instagram, Facebook, websites if you want to have a look.